Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. In the sun-scorched desert of Arizona, one man built his dream home beyond all rules until a powerful HOA president set her sights on his land. What began with a fake welcome letter spiraled into surveillance, lies, and a war for control. This isn't just a dispute, it's a siege. I bought the land 5 years ago. 20,000 square feet of dry Arizona soil, speckled with brush and cacti, bordering the HOA-run development of Sandy Creek on one side and open county desert on the other. The house I built there was mine in every sense of the word, drawn with my own hand, wired by my own fingers, and finished with sweat that still dried under my fingernails weeks later. After 12 years of Army contracting work overseas, I'd had enough of being told where to live, how to live, and what shade of beige to paint my front door. That's why I picked this lot, outside the borders of Sandy Creek HOA, with a clear legal buffer. I made sure of it. My realtor and I double-checked every plat map and zoning document before I signed anything. And yet 3 weeks ago, someone shoved a glossy welcome folder into my mailbox. "Welcome to the Sandy Creek community," it read, in bright faux cursive. Inside, an HOA welcome letter, community bylaws, and a list of acceptable landscaping elements. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they meant it for the new couple down the hill, first-time homebuyers with a golden doodle and a mailbox that still leaned like a drunkard on Sunday morning. So I tossed the packet in the recycling and went back to patching the east wall of my workshop. Then came the second letter. This time, it was certified mail, official letterhead, with the HOA's name and their president's signature, Karen Hale. According to the letter, my solar panels were visually discordant and violated Article 7, Section 9 of the Community Design Covenant. There was also mention of a $500 fine if the non-conforming installation wasn't removed within 30 days. I read that letter twice. Then I laughed for a solid minute. My house wasn't part of their jurisdiction. The closest Sandy Creek house was 200 feet away, with a property line that bent away from mine like a magnet repelling the truth. So I penned a polite response, attached a copy of my deed and zoning map, and mailed it back. I figured that would be the end of it, but Karen didn't take the hint. A few days later, she showed up in person. I heard her long before I saw her. The click of expensive heels on gravel, the rustling of papers, and then the distinctive tone of someone who's spent too much time in PTA meetings and not enough with actual consequences. "Mr. Marks?" she called out, eyes scanning my porch like she was auditing it. "Karen Hale, HOA president. I just wanted to have a quick chat." She wore a crisp blue blazer, white slacks, and a smile so tight it could slice drywall. Her clipboard was thick, the kind of thick that meant she had tabs, color-coded highlights, and maybe even a spreadsheet or two. I was midway through sanding down a maple cabinet, but I turned off the sander and stepped onto the porch. "Afternoon," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "I got your letter. You're mistaken. I'm not under HOA governance. This property is private." Karen's smile didn't budge. "Well, that's where things are a bit nuanced. You see, the community has expanded over the years. It's not uncommon for boundaries to be reevaluated. Sometimes the maps lag behind." "Not my map," I said, holding up the laminated copy I'd brought from the garage. "This one's dated from the last revision 2 years ago. My parcel is outside your overlay. You can check with the county." She glanced at the map, then back at me, lips twitching just slightly. "Be that as it may, we have a responsibility to maintain the visual harmony of our community. Your home is visible from the Upper Ridge Trail. We've received comments." "From who? Binocular-wielding joggers?" I asked, not bothering to hide my tone. Karen's smile finally cracked. "We can escalate this, Mr. Marks. Non-compliance has consequences." "You're absolutely right," I said, and stepped back inside. That night, I got a strange feeling. I couldn't explain it, just the kind of edge you get after years in combat zones. I checked my perimeter cameras, installed not for drama, but for wildlife, and the occasional desert drunk who wandered off the state road. Nothing showed up, but the HOA folder was back on my porch the next morning, this time with a sticky note. "Let's talk." I didn't respond. I upgraded my camera system instead. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure started to mount. I saw a white SUV, brand new Lexus, drive slowly by my house 3 times a day. The same woman behind the wheel. Neighborhood kids stopped waving when they biked past. Someone threw a torn HOA newsletter over my fence. Then Steve, my neighbor across the wash, caught me as I was taking out trash. "You really pissed off the queen bee," he said, nodding toward Sandy Creek. "Not trying to," I said. "Don't need to try." Karen's the kind of person who thinks a property line is just a suggestion. He lowered his voice. She's done this before. 2 years ago, she ran a guy out who had a flagpole she didn't like. Guy's house wasn't even in the HOA. She just made it miserable. I didn't answer, but I made a note. Never underestimate people who run meetings for fun. By the end of the month, I'd started logging everything. License plates, HOA letters, photos of every inch of my property. Something told me this wasn't just Karen being nosy. She wanted control, and I wasn't about to give it to her. I figured ignoring her would slow her down. I was wrong. If anything, Karen took my silence as a challenge. It started small, subtle. I began getting notices from city departments I'd never even interacted with. One claimed my grass was too high, this in Arizona, where most people don't even have grass. I had gravel and 2 stubborn sage bushes. Another was a fire safety inspection warning me that I had unsecured chemicals on site. The only thing flammable in my garage was an old propane tank I hadn't touched in months. Then came noise complaints. One about a generator operating past midnight. I didn't even own a generator. I knew what this was. Death by bureaucracy. Karen was pulling strings through back channels, filing complaints under concerned resident or anonymous tip. The city had to act on it, even if they didn't want to. They sent inspectors in polos and clipboards, always sheepish, always apologetic. One of them, a young guy from the fire department, looked over my property and said, "I'm just checking boxes, sir." But off the record, "Someone's trying really hard to make your life annoying." I thanked him and added his name to the log. Then came the mail. 3 thick envelopes over the course of 10 days, each one more aggressive than the last. The first claimed I had installed a structure, my detached tool shed, without HOA architectural approval. The second demanded I remove my solar panels or face compounded fines. The third included a breakdown of non-compliance penalties totaling over $2,000. At the bottom, in small print, failure to comply may result in lien consideration. That's when I stopped being polite. I called my lawyer, Rachel Chang, and forwarded everything. She laughed. Classic HOA overreach. "You've got all the deeds and zoning records, right?" "Color copies and notarized," I said. "I even have drone shots showing my property boundaries." "Good," she said. "Start a folder and buy more hard drives. This is going to get dumber before it gets smarter." She wasn't kidding. 2 nights later, my motion alert pinged at 3 in the morning. I checked the feed. Someone was standing at the edge of my driveway, aiming a DSLR camera with a telephoto lens at my garage. The figure was tall, thin, wore a hoodie, and moved like they didn't want to be seen. I saved the footage and called it in. Sheriff's department sent a cruiser, but the guy was long gone by then. I gave the deputy a flash drive. He reviewed the clip and said, "Looks like someone hired a private investigator." "What am I? A cheating spouse?" He shrugged. HOAs are weird. A few days later, I caught a silver Ford idling near my backyard fence. When I approached, it sped off, but not before I caught the license plate. I ran it through a contact at the DMV. It was registered to someone named Gregory Hale, Karen's son. Cute. I upgraded the drone, added thermal tracking, expanded range, better night vision. It wasn't just about catching creepers now. I needed to prove a pattern, and I was starting to build one. Meanwhile, I noticed the neighborhood mood shifting. Kids didn't play near my property anymore. Adults stopped making eye contact. The woman next door, who used to bake me banana bread, now pretended not to hear when I said good morning. I chalked it up to Karen's campaign. She was poisoning the well, whispering her HOA gospel to anyone who'd listen. He's unstable. He's aggressive. He doesn't care about the community. Steve warned me first. We were chatting near his mailbox when he leaned in and said, "Watch out for the newsletter." "What newsletter?" "The one coming next week. Karen's having the HOA distribute a bulletin about non-compliant properties. She doesn't name you directly, but it's obvious. Defamation. If it were me, I'd get ahead of it." Sure enough, 3 days later, it showed up. 4 pages of glorified toilet paper filled with cherry-picked bylaws and ominous warnings about individuals endangering harmony. On page 2, there was a blurry aerial shot of my roof with a red circle around my satellite dish. "Visual pollutant," the caption read. The kicker, they labeled my workshop as an unauthorized utility enclosure. Rachel laughed so hard on the phone she had to mute herself. "This is good," she said. "They're putting their names on this now. This is ammo." But it was only getting worse. That Friday, I came home from a supply run to find a brand new notice duct taped to my gate. Notice of violation, non-standard paint color, rectify within 10 days. I stared at it for a full minute. My house was painted tan, the same goddamn tan as half the houses in Arizona. Later that night, I spotted Karen pacing on the sidewalk near my property, talking on her Bluetooth headset like she was managing a Fortune 500 company. She stopped long enough to glare at my cameras, then walked off like a satisfied cat. The next morning, someone threw a half-empty beer can into my driveway. I picked it up, took a photo, and tossed it in a plastic evidence bag. Then I walked into my garage, booted up my computer, and opened a new folder on my desktop. HOA War Evidence. The next phase didn't feel like harassment, it felt like infiltration. It started when I got a call from Rachel on a Tuesday morning. She sounded more annoyed than worried. "The county assessor's office flagged your property," she said. "Apparently, your parcel is under review for zoning adjustment." I blinked at the phone like it had insulted me. What the hell does that even mean? It means someone submitted a request to have your lot reassigned to the HOA overlay zone. I stood up so fast I knocked over my coffee. They can't just do that. "No, they can't," she said, "but they can file for it. And if nobody pushes back, the city just rubber stamps it. 90 days later, congratulations. You're an involuntary member of Sandy Creek HOA." She paused. I pulled the records. The request was submitted by Karen Hale, acting president of the HOA. She claimed the boundary map was inaccurate and that your lot had always been intended to be part of Sandy Creek. Rage doesn't always show up as shouting. Sometimes it's the kind that makes your body cold and your brain clinical. I asked for the case number and hung up. An hour later, I was in the county records office, slapping my deed, my original plat map, and a notarized affidavit onto the desk of a zoning officer who looked like he wanted to be anywhere but there. "I'm not part of Sandy Creek," I said. "I've never been. I bought this land specifically because I wasn't." The officer glanced at the documents, nodded slowly, and pulled up the file on his screen. Then his eyebrows lifted. "Well," he said, "this is weird." The request included a supplemental packet with letters of support from the HOA board. "What board?" I asked. "She is the board." He tilted the monitor toward me. I counted 5 signatures. One was a dead man. George Eckhart. I remembered reading his obituary. He'd died of a stroke 4 months earlier. "This isn't just petty," I said. "This is fraud. Do you want to file an official objection?" I laughed. "You're goddamn right I do." I filed not only an objection but also a formal ethics complaint, flagged the fraudulent submission, and attached every document I could think of. Rachel reviewed it all and added her own memo citing land use case law. We emailed copies to the City Planning Commission, the District Attorney's Office, and the local media, just in case. The next week, I got an anonymous manila envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, architectural blueprints. Commercial blueprints. They showed a proposed development labeled Sandy Creek Community Arts and Wellness Center, a massive building complex, parking lot, retail kiosks. Phase 2 of the design bled past the current HOA boundaries, right over my land. They were planning to take it. That's when everything clicked. Karen wasn't just obsessed with rules or conformity. She had dollar signs in her eyes. My property stood between the HOA and a 7-figure real estate deal. They needed my land for expansion, and since I wasn't selling, they were trying to backdoor it. I showed the plans to Steve. He whistled. "She's working with a developer. This is a buyout scheme. They already have a buyer lined up. She probably promised them control of the whole stretch." I nodded. "And I'm the wrench in the gears." "You're the fucking bulldozer in the gears." After that, I noticed more than just neighbors avoiding me. I started getting letters from local businesses, landscapers, trash pickup, even my internet provider, suddenly unable to continue service due to zoning complications. I'd been blacklisted, so I leaned into it. I filed a Freedom of Information request for all city communications with the HOA over the past 12 months. I got hundreds of pages of email dumps. Karen's name was everywhere. She'd attended consultations with developers, held lunch meetings with city planners. She even submitted community feedback surveys, dozens of them, all printed in the same font, using similar language. Rachel called them what they were: manufactured consent. But the real smoking gun came 2 weeks later, buried in an old email from a city planning intern. Attached was a scanned document, a signed letter from Karen to the developer assuring them that the land adjacent to Parcel 22B was under HOA review and expected to be absorbed within the year. That was my parcel. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I sent the document to Rachel. She replied 1 minute later, "We're going nuclear." I was in bed when the lights hit my window, not soft yellow porch lights or the warm beam of a neighbor's sedan. No. This was industrial grade, high beam, get on the ground or else kind of light. Blinding, piercing. I sat up, heart already hammering, and checked the front monitor on my nightstand. 2 patrol cars. One parked at an angle across my driveway, the other right on my lawn. Then came the voice. "This is the County Sheriff's Department. Occupants of the house, exit immediately with your hands visible." I froze. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hallucinating. This was happening. I threw on a t-shirt and boxers, grabbed my wallet and keys, and walked slowly to the front door with my arms raised. My security cameras caught the whole thing. The flood of red and blue light, the drawn weapons, the 3 officers crouched behind their doors like they were expecting a drug bust. I stepped outside barefoot onto my porch. "This is my house," I called out, calm but loud. "I live here. My name is Jason Marks." One of the officers approached cautiously, weapon drawn but not aimed directly at me. The other 2 held position. "We received a report of a burglary in progress," he said. "Who filed it?" "Anonymous tip," he said. "Claimed someone was breaking into this property. Described a man in dark clothing entering through a side window." I pointed to the cameras. "Every corner of this house is under surveillance. I've got timestamps showing me inside since before sunset. You want the feed?" He hesitated, then motioned to the others to lower their weapons. "Hang tight," he said. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on the porch, showing him the footage from the last 6 hours on a tablet. Nothing, not even a jackrabbit, just me, cooking dinner, watching TV, and falling asleep with a book. The 3rd officer, stocky, buzz-cut, familiar, stayed back, arms folded. He hadn't said a word the whole time, but I recognized the nameplate. Hale, same last name as Karen, nephew, cousin, something. It didn't matter. The guy looked at me like I was a stain on his boot. Once the responding officer was satisfied, he muttered something about false alarms and better safe than sorry, then apologized, sort of, and told me I could go back inside. Before they left, Hale spoke. "You should really make sure no one's sneaking around your place at night," he said with a smirk. I stared at him, unblinking. "Thanks for the tip, officer." As they drove off, I stood in my driveway, barefoot, arms crossed, teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. That was it. They crossed the line. I called Rachel the moment the sun came up. She didn't even sound surprised. They used the police as a scare tactic," she said. "Classic move. Manufactured emergency. But it's also illegal. You could have been shot." "I want to sue." "Oh, we're way past lawsuits," she said. "I'm drafting federal filings. False police report. Abuse of authority. Endangerment. And we're going to name Karen and her little officer cousin." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I spent the rest of the morning archiving footage, backing it up in 3 places, and preparing copies for court. I also filed a formal complaint with the Sheriff's Internal Affairs Unit and sent an open letter to the local paper. I attached video stills of me, hands up, standing in my own front yard while 3 cops treated me like a suspect in my own home. By the afternoon, the postman dropped off a new letter from the HOA. This one was hand-delivered. It read, "Due to recent security concerns, we urge you to consider working more closely with the association for the safety of all residents. Refusal to comply with safety standards may result in further action." No signature, no logo, just the stench of veiled threat. Later that night, I was reviewing camera footage when I spotted 2 shadows near the back fence. Teenagers. They were trying to climb over, probably dared by some bored neighbor. I hit the siren remotely. They bolted. I called the sheriff's office again. They sent a deputy, younger guy. Seemed sincere. I showed him the video. He watched it, took notes, and said, "You want to press charges?" "No," I said. "Not yet, but I want it logged. Every incident. Every name." He nodded and made a report. Before leaving, he turned and said, "You're not the first. HOA's got a reputation, but most folks cave before it gets to this point." I smiled. "Then I guess they've never met me." By morning, someone had stapled flyers on every power pole along the street. A picture of my house framed in red and the words, "Uncooperative resident endangering community safety. Demand action." I tore one down, laughed, and scanned it into my court file. Let them keep pushing. They had no idea what was coming. The courthouse smelled like paper and sweat. Old bricks, buzzing fluorescence, and that specific kind of silence where everything feels like it's about to either explode or be dismissed for lunch. Rachel and I sat side by side in the waiting area outside courtroom C, each of us with a briefcase full of fire. Mine had video stills, zoning maps, time-stamped footage from 6 different cameras, and a full-color aerial drone composite of my property line. Hers had legal briefs, citations, and the judicial equivalent of a sledgehammer. We weren't just filing a civil suit against the HOA anymore. We were filing a multi-tiered action that included Karen Hale personally, Officer Jonathan Hale from the Sheriff's Department, the Sandy Creek HOA as an organization, and a John Doe developer entity listed in the preliminary filings. Rachel called it a surgical strike. I called it righteous war. "Let me guess," the clerk said, flipping through our packet with a smirk. HOA overreach. HOA attempted land theft, false police report, endangerment, and fraud, Rachel said. The clerk raised her eyebrows. That's less common. We were granted a hearing within 3 weeks. In the meantime, the situation in the neighborhood went radioactive. Karen didn't take the legal action quietly. No, she cranked the propaganda machine into overdrive. Another HOA newsletter went out, this one bolder, more aggressive. It claimed there was an ongoing legal threat to community cohesion and accused an unnamed individual of provoking law enforcement and endangering public safety. Neighbors started walking their dogs past my driveway in pairs, shooting me the kind of looks normally reserved for meth labs and unregistered pit bulls. My trash service was suspended without notice. My internet, already spotty, got mysteriously cut for 4 days. When I finally reached the provider, they told me the municipal permitting system had flagged the address. They wouldn't say why. I didn't need them to. Meanwhile, the drone became my best friend. I upgraded its memory, added audio sync, and flew it twice a day on a pre-programmed route. I caught a lot. Karen speaking to city staff behind the HOA office. Officer Hale parking his cruiser near the development site, a delivery of rolled blueprints to a trailer marked with the developer's logo. But the best catch came one humid afternoon. Karen standing outside a cafe with a suited man I hadn't seen before. They shook hands. He handed her a white envelope. The drone hovered at just the right distance. Not intrusive, but close enough to zoom in on her face as she opened the envelope and smiled. Rachel labeled the video "bribe handshake" in the evidence folder. Even better, she cross-referenced the man's face with LinkedIn and found him, project manager for Western Horizon Development Group, same company listed on the blueprints I'd been sent anonymously. The dots weren't just connecting, they were forming a bullseye. That same week, my FOIA request came through. Hundreds of emails between the HOA and city zoning office. Buried deep in the chain was a thread from Karen to a council liaison. She wrote, "Once the parcel is reassigned, the resident will no longer be a legal obstruction to Phase 2. He has no political capital, and we expect him to settle or vacate under pressure. Do not delay." I read that line 3 times. Settle or vacate. That wasn't policy. That was eviction by warfare. But then came the wild card. A young woman named Tasha showed up at my gate, early 20s, flustered, nervous. She said she'd worked part-time for the HOA, mostly stuffing envelopes, typing minutes, and helping Karen with community surveys. She said she couldn't sleep anymore. She forged signatures, Tasha whispered, on board documents, on development letters. I saw her do it. She handed me a USB stick. Inside, scans of board meeting forms with identical handwriting on multiple lines, metadata from the survey files Karen submitted to the city, and a voice memo. In it, Karen was ranting to someone off mic about how Jason needs to be made an example of and how the new zoning will happen whether he likes it or not. That was the moment it all crystallized. The fraud, the smear campaign, the fake emergency. Call the corrupted cop, the land grab. All of it. We weren't in a neighborhood anymore. We were in a battlefield. And I was winning. The courthouse was full when we walked in. Reporters lined the back wall. Karen sat up front with her lawyer, a smug man in a powder blue suit who looked like he practiced smiling in the mirror. Officer Hale wasn't in uniform, but he wore the same scowl as the night he nearly got me killed. The rest of the HOA board sat stiffly, pretending to look dignified. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Ramirez, called the court to order with the kind of voice that didn't tolerate games. This wasn't a small claim squabble anymore. This was war in a courtroom. Rachel started strong. She laid out the foundation, the zoning boundaries, the false architectural complaints, the harassment campaign. Then she played a montage, video footage from my cameras and drone, showing the anonymous surveillance, Karen's meetings with the developer, the flyers accusing me of being a public threat. The jury watched in dead silence. Then came the body blow. Rachel introduced the email, Karen's own words about reassigning the parcel and forcing me to settle or vacate. The judge's brow lifted just enough to show she took notice. Karen's lawyer objected on foundation grounds, but Ramirez overruled. "We're not pretending anymore," she said. "Proceed." Next, the deepfake. We presented a digital forensic analyst, a straight-laced MIT grad with a laser pointer and receipts. He broke down frame by frame how the fake party video had been built. Face-swapped clips, artificial crowd audio, metadata stripped and re-encoded from a public stock footage source. It was professional work, weaponized technology. The jury was horrified. Rachel followed with Tasha, the former HOA assistant. Tasha looked terrified but steady. She confirmed under oath that Karen had forged signatures, submitted fake surveys, and told her, word for word, "We'll scare him into surrendering the land. He doesn't belong here." Karen's lawyer tried to rattle her. "Were you fired by the HOA?" "No," Tasha said. "I quit when I realized what they were doing." "And you didn't report this sooner?" "I was scared," she said, voice cracking. "But I'm more scared of what they're getting away with." Meek drop. When it was the defense's turn, they tried every tactic in the book, painting me as uncooperative, claiming I was paranoid, insisting the HOA had reasonable community concerns. But Ramirez wasn't buying it. She stopped Karen mid-testimony when she began rambling about aesthetic integrity. "Mrs. Hale, this isn't a fashion show. You're under oath. Answer the question." Karen flinched. Then came the final strike. Rachel brought in the forensic accountant. Turns out the developer had already transferred a donation of $75,000 into an HOA-affiliated nonprofit 2 months before the attempted rezoning. The check was signed the same week Karen had the county office flooded with support letters. Game, set, match. The court went quiet as Ramirez delivered the verdict. Karen Hale, guilty of fraud, defamation, malicious prosecution, and conspiracy to commit property seizure. Officer Jonathan Hale, guilty of misconduct and reckless endangerment. HHA as an organization liable for damages, negligence, and unlawful abuse of authority. Rachel requested a full punitive compensation package, legal fees, damages, loss of service disruption, and emotional distress. The total? $2 million. The judge granted it in full. Ramirez added, "This court finds that the HOA acted not only outside the scope of its authority, but with deliberate malice. Furthermore, this behavior represents a systemic abuse of property rights that warrants federal attention." Boom. Karen's face drained of color. Her lawyer slumped. The jury didn't even look at her as they exited. The courtroom emptied slowly. Reporters hovered. Flashbulbs popped. I stayed quiet. Rachel stood beside me, arms crossed, the faintest smile on her face. Outside, one of the other HOA members caught up with me. "I didn't know," he said. "Yeah," I said. That's kind of the problem. The check cleared 2 weeks later, $2 million. It looked absurd on paper. I stared at the bank portal for a solid minute, blinking, waiting for it to somehow vanish. It didn't. The city wired the funds on behalf of the HOA after a settlement agreement forced them to liquidate several community reserve accounts. Karen's assets had been frozen pending appeal, and Officer Hale was placed on administrative leave the same morning the judgment was handed down. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the shift. The first time I stepped outside after the verdict, the neighborhood felt different. No sideways glares, no muttered comments. Even the wind sounded cleaner. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Then Steve waved at me. "Hell of a win," he said. I nodded. "Took a few swings." He chuckled. "You cracked the damn foundation." Apparently, once the judgment went public, the Sandy Creek HOA board fractured. 2 members resigned within 48 hours. A third went on local TV and apologized for turning a blind eye to administrative overreach. They tried to do damage control, but the media had already dubbed it the Liberty Hill case. I liked that name. The city assigned an external monitor to oversee the HOA for a full 2 years. Karen was barred from holding any leadership position in any community organization indefinitely. The developer quietly pulled out of the project and scrubbed their name from all local filings. I imagine they had bigger PR fires to manage now. I spent the next few weeks turning my property into exactly what I wanted it to be. Finished the solar grid, repainted the north wall in fire truck red, just because I could. Built a small covered patio with a hand-carved sign that read, "Private property, no HOA jurisdiction." And then I got an idea. With Rachel's help, I launched a nonprofit freehold watch. Its mission to educate homeowners about HOA abuse, property rights, and how to fight back. I posted everything I'd learned, filing guides, legal templates, even a list of drone models I recommended for aerial evidence collection. The site got 10,000 hits in the first week. People started reaching out, from Texas, Florida, Nevada. Horror stories worse than mine. One guy in Utah had been fined for non-native bird feeders. A woman in Georgia was threatened for growing tomatoes. I started taking calls. Then I started speaking. The city council invited me to talk about zoning transparency. A local law school asked if I'd guest lecture on land use litigation. Me, the guy who just wanted to be left alone. One afternoon, while I was cleaning out my garage, I found the very first HOA letter Karen ever sent, the one about my solar panels being visually discordant. I read it again, laughed, and burned it in a coffee can with some old receipts. I didn't need it anymore. I'd already won. But it wasn't just about me now. It was about all the other folks standing on their porches, watching someone like Karen knock on their door and thinking, I guess I don't have a choice. Now they do. It took me nearly 3 years to finish everything I wanted to do with the land, not just the house, the fencing, or the paint. That was done long ago. I'm talking about the statement, the exhale, the final punctuation mark that said, "You lost." I stayed. I had the sign custom built. Polished steel, laser-cut letters mounted to a carved wooden arch over the front gate. It read, "Welcome to Liberty Hill. No HOA. No nonsense. Constitution applies here." It wasn't subtle. That was the point. Every week, I got 1 or 2 visitors, travelers, bloggers, even the occasional disillusioned neighbor who just wanted to see the infamous no HOA guy who sued his entire neighborhood and won. Some wanted advice. Some brought stories. Most just wanted to shake my hand. I started keeping a cooler of iced tea on the porch for guests. It was weird at first. I'd never been the local legend type. Hell, I used to go out of my way to avoid small talk. Now people wanted me to keynote events. HOA reform groups quoted my testimony in campaign ads. I was asked twice to run for office. I said no, every time. The only office I wanted was the one in my garage workshop with the drone control rig and the coffee machine that groaned like it resented being alive. Speaking of drones, yeah, I kept using them. Not for surveillance anymore. Not really. Mostly for documenting wild javelina that came down from the hills or tracking monsoon clouds. But I always kept one charged just in case the HOA decided to resurrect itself from the ashes. Spoiler, it didn't. Karen disappeared from public life completely. Last I heard, she sold her house quietly, moved somewhere in California, and started a small online business selling community planning consultations. Irony's a hell of a drug. Officer Hale resigned before he could be fired. An internal review showed a long list of questionable conduct dating back years. Apparently, I wasn't his first misjudgment, just the last one he made in uniform. The HOA was placed under third-party administration for 2 years, then dissolved after residents voted overwhelmingly to disband it. Sandy Creek became what it was always pretending to be, a neighborhood, not a kingdom. As for me, I still live here, still on the same lot, still outside any HOA jurisdiction. I spend my mornings on the porch, watching the sunrise over the mountains, and my evenings listening to coyotes argue with the wind. And sometimes, only sometimes, I think back to the night those patrol cars lit up my house like a crime scene. That was the moment it could have all gone wrong. Instead, it became the moment everything changed. Because when they came to erase me, they wrote my name in all caps instead.